Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. It's great to be with you today. And we got a great show in store for us today because we're going to be talking about apologetics itself. You know, often we talk about topics in apologetics like, Blessed Virgin Mary, angels and saints, so forth, controverted issues. Sometimes we focus mainly on those individual issues, but not apologetics per se. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how to do apologetics and specifically the role history plays in apologetics. So, church history is such an important component in explaining, defending the faith, and we need to have a good grasp of it and to help us kind of figure out the role in maybe some areas of church history that I think every Catholic ought to know. We have our good friend, Catholic Brian Mercier is going to be joining us. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk about history and apologetics, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Brian's just full of energy, and man, he has done the work in the trenches, and I love guests that they get dirty, they get their hands dirty, so to speak, dialoguing with people, interacting with people. He's got a great ministry there on YouTube, on his Catholic Truth channel on YouTube. And so he'll be coming up on the other side of the break. Also, as always, we have our Finding the Fallacy. We do every episode, informal fallacy. Today's Finding the Fallacy is Definitional Retreat. Very interesting. And also, we meet an early church father. Today's early church father is St. John Cassian. So we got a lot of good stuff in store for us today. Speaking of YouTube, hey, I want to thank everybody for jumping on my channel, Apocrypha Apocalypse, that I just unveiled, which deals with the Deuterocanon, which Protestants call Apocrypha. And as you know, I've done a lot of work in the field of getting this word out that Protestants are missing 7 Old Testament books in their Bible. So I decided to, move what I put down in research and in print and trying to convert that into videos. And I want these videos to circulate as widely as possible because, let's face it, a lot of people just don't have time to read today. A lot of their information comes from YouTube. And, there's some good stuff on the Deuterocanon, on the web. But I think I can contribute some very interesting stuff that could hopefully change the minds and hearts of our separated brethren so that they embrace the whole of Scripture. And in order to do that, I need your help. So please, jump on my channel. Just go to search engine, type in Apocrypha Apocalypse. And, if you enjoyed the videos, you want to support this apocalypse that I'm trying to unveil, please subscribe, do all this stuff. Tell people about the videos, share the videos, because, as you know, it's exposure is the name of the game. That's how YouTube, how all those algorithms work, is the more viewers, more subscribers, more people talk about it. The more visible you are, and the more visible you are, the easier it is to reach other people. So not only that, but, it's part of Apologetics in Place. So that goes the same for Virgin Most Powerful Radio and Hands-On Apologetics. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Please please do all that social media type stuff, because that also helps our mission. It helps our visibility. And hopefully it'll help us help others better know and love Jesus. That's the name of the game. That's one of the things that Terry Barber and myself, were talking, and I said, The reason I get up in the morning every day is to help people better know and love Jesus. And Terry's like, absolutely. That's the exact same thing with me. I knew I was in the right place when he said that. So, and I had no doubts of that before. So anyway, let's see. I haven't given my shout outs yet. Shame on me. Give a quick shout out to all of our good friends out there, our good friends in the social media section of the dojo over here on YouTube, Facebook, and all the other social media streaming. Welcome aboard, folks. Great to see you here. Also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and also via podcast around the world via our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org, or a handy-dandy phone app. So thank you, folks. Welcome aboard. The dojo is big, and we welcome you. All right, so without further ado, why don't we jump into our material? Well, let's go to Defining the Fallacy. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the definitional retreat. The definitional retreat takes place when someone changes the meaning of the words in order to deal with an objection raised against the original wording. By changing the meaning, he turns it into a different statement. So, here's an example one website gives. It says, one person says, I've never once been abroad. And then his friend says, as a matter of fact, you've been in Toronto. And then the other person says, you cannot call visiting Toronto going abroad. So here, going abroad now has changed definition. It isn't just traveling outside the country, but perhaps, traveling across an ocean or something like that. That's a case of definitional retreat. Now, this is similar to moving the goalpost, but that's a little different, though. Moving the goalpost means that it's kind of like you say, if you satisfy X, then I'll believe the person satisfies X. And then you say, well, no, X is actually something different, and you change it. You move the goalpost. This is a little different. Definitional retreat has to do with defining words and redefining words. It's actually much closer to another Finding the Fallacy, the No True Scotsman Fallacy, but not so much moving the goalpost, although they all play with definition and end goals and that type of thing. So just be aware of it. You can always spot somebody doing a definitional retreat simply because they are very nebulous, or they keep changing the meaning of terms in their argument. So good to know. All right, let's jump to the Meet the Early Church Father for today. St. John Cassian is his name. John Cassian, by the way, is not on the Church's universal calendar, according to Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers, but he is reckoned and revered as a saint in a good many local churches in France. In spite of some evidence and arguments to the contrary, it remains most probably that Cassian was a native of southern Gaul, that is southern France. As a youth, in company with his older friend Germanus, Cassian sojourned for a while at the monastery in Bethlehem. Later, about the year 385 AD, his pursuit of asceticism took him to Egypt, where he spent 7 years learning the science of asceticism from the monks and ascetics of the monastic homeland. A second time, he came to Egypt and spent another year in the deserts of Crete, which he later termed a habitat of the most perfect monks. Journeying on to Constantinople, he was ordained to the diaconate by John Chrysostom himself, and in 405 AD, with Chrysostom on the second time in exile, Cassian, still in the company of Germanus, came to Rome, but after this, we hear of the faithful Germanus no more. 415, Cassian, now a priest, founded 2 monasteries in Mercier, one of them men and the other for women, and he stayed there until his death. About 20 years later, he ruled his monasteries as an abbot. And it's these monasteries in Marseille, and with Cassian as its father, that semi-Pelagianism was born. Originally, the semi-Pelagians were called Mercians after the origins in Marseille, And if we fall into the common error of regarding semi-Pelagianism as no more as a kind of diluted Pelagianism, we can never understand John Cassian. As a semi-Pelagian, he held no beliefs in common at all with the Pelagians. The latter he condemned roundly. He regarded Pelagianism as the mother of Nestorianism, which he termed Pelagianism's pupil and imitator, because while Pelagianism taught that a man could by his own efforts and without God's help achieve righteousness, Nestorian taught that the man Jesus, by the virtuous conduct of his life, came himself to deserve union with the divine majesty. And if the latter notion seems very similar to a rather common idea in our times, by the way, to the effect that Christ only gradually came to realize that he was God, perhaps was not fully aware of it until his hanging on the cross. This is same as saying that his divinity only gradually actualized and perhaps not fully actualized until his hanging on the cross. Possibly it's because Nestorianism is not nearly so dead of an issue as some suppose, and there is effective revival of it among some quote-unquote Catholic theologians even today. Heresies never die, Jurgen says. They just change their names. And I cannot recall any modern heresy that's really new, nor do I know any ancient heresy that has been slain outright. Catholic doctrine is so entirely cohesive that if only one thread of it is cut, the whole unravels. And that's actually a very astute observation by Jurgens. So by the way, John Cassian is known for 3 great works. His Institutions, his work on the Incarnation against Nestorius, and his collections. Coming up next, Catholic Brian Mercier is going to be joining us. We're going to talk about apologetics and history, so stay tuned.
Jesus said in Matthew 26, "Stay awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation." According to St. Ephrem, Jesus, who feared nothing, experienced fear and asked to be freed from death, although he knew it was impossible. How much more must we persevere in prayer before temptation assails us, so that we may be freed when the test has come? May God grant that we may withstand temptation and carry out his will in all things.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2727. 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome, everybody, Hands on Apologetics. And we're going to talk about history, and we're going to talk about apologetics because the two are not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand. In fact, many times defending the faith requires us to know something about our history. And to help us talk about that, we have our good friend, Master Apologist, Catholic Brian Mercier with us. Brian is a professional Catholic speaker, a retreat leader, an author, and a Catholic apologist. He has spoken to countless teens and adults over the last 20 years through confirmation retreats, parish missions, keynotes. He's been on Catholic radio and television, such as EWTN, and also in the United States and Ireland. And you can check out all his great stuff on his YouTube channel, which is very easy to remember. It's called Catholic Truth. So check it out. And Brian, welcome back to Hands on Apologetics.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you again. It's been a little while.
It has been, but it's always good to be back on your show. I enjoy discussing apologetics.
Yeah, absolutely. And, today's topic's a really good one because, church history is a major component in defending the faith, isn't it?
Absolutely. I would say it's almost as important as knowing the Bible. It's very important to know church history as well.
Yeah. In fact, it's Brian, to me, I'm trying to think back. I went through Catholic grade school. I went through Catholic high school. I didn't go to a Catholic college, though. But I don't remember even having a Catholic history class. Have you ever taken, growing up, was that part of your curriculum?
To be honest with you, I don't remember ever taking church history. I remember a little bit of history in public schools, but I went to Catholic school most of my life, and I can't remember whether I studied church history or not. But it wasn't until many, many, many years later, after my reversion to the faith, and after I came to know Jesus and then realized I couldn't explain my faith, that I started studying history to see if the Catholic Church was true. And I started studying history to see if the doctrines of the Catholic Church could hold up, or if they didn't, because if the Catholic Church isn't true, then I don't want to be part of it. So that is one way that I got into the Bible and started studying the Bible, but it's also how I personally got into church history as well.
Yeah, that seems like a huge lacuna in our education system because, as you know, I was in your introduction, I was saying that you're in the trenches. You deal with individuals every day. You're not just up in the cloud, making YouTube videos, but you've interacted with people of all ages. And, objections usually are historical-based objections. It's certainly questions within our own Catholic community.
Absolutely. And that's why I think for the listeners, people may just tune out and say, oh, church history, I'm not interested. But once you know church history, even just a little bit, Gary, it changes everything, and it becomes electrifying. It becomes interesting, and it can really help you in conversations on apologetics with Protestants and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and other religions, but also with atheists and agnostics and people who have left the Catholic Church, former Catholics, because they all have some sort of objection to the Catholic Church in a way that relates to church history, whether it's the Crusades were evil, therefore the church is evil and I don't want to be Catholic, or whether it's Catholics don't know the Bible and therefore, you should leave the Catholic Church because you need to know the Bible, or whether it's you pick the topic, the Inquisition, Galileo, Constantine. Constantine started the Catholic Church, many people say. And in fact, the Jehovah's Witnesses told me that many years ago, and that's one thing that got me to start looking into church history. And I'm just going to say it right off the bat. Actually talking about church history with other religions and people is fun. It makes it fun. And that's not the goal of apologetics. It's just a side perk. But, the reality is the way that Protestants can get us off of our game with talking about the Bible, we can get them off their game by talking about church history. So, for example, Protestants may derail a Catholic by saying, find me the word Pope in the Bible. The Pope is not in the Bible. So if you show me the Pope in the Bible, then I will become Catholic. Likewise, they may say, find me purgatory in the Bible. Or show me where the Bible says to pray to Mary. Can you show me those words? Because if you can't, your Catholic Church is lying to you and you're making up false doctrines, because everything you need to know is in the Bible. And at this point, Catholics get very uncomfortable. Catholics don't know what to say. They get this deer in the headlight look, and they're like, I got to go cook something, or, something's burning in my oven.
Right.
So they just want to run away. But the reality is we can do the exact same thing by turning it around, Gary, and saying something like, oh, you love the Bible? Let's discuss the Bible. Where did the Bible come from? Who made it? What church did the people who made it belong to? How long did it take them? And how do we know that the books that are in the Bible are actually supposed to be there? If you go by the Bible alone, and the Bible is the final say on all matters spiritual, then where does the Bible say which books should be in the Bible? And at this point, most Protestants start to get the deer in the headlight look, and they start to get a panicky look on their face, and they want to go check their oven for burning chicken that isn't cooking. It's how it turns it around. And I find that most Protestant pastors even can't answer the questions that I just asked you about where the Bible came from.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. And it's true for Catholics as well. We understand what the Bible is. People appeal to its authority, but it's like, once that history is over, with the last book of the New Testament, it's like people just don't really even think about what happens with the church after the Bible, or is there a church after the Bible? In fact, how did the Bible come together? I mean, yeah, those are really off the radar screens.
Way off their radar screens. And this isn't to cut them down or degrade them in any way.
Yeah.
It's just to say that they're extremely deficient in church history. So if you want to have good success in talking to Protestants and other religions, I have found that it's very helpful to know church history, and you can really derail them from their pre-programmed, I know 20 verses in the Bible and I regurgitate them all the time. Here they are, and here's why you're wrong. If you can get them to start thinking about these questions, well, they're in a whole territory that they've never been. They're in a whole territory that they don't even understand and they've never thought about. And a lot of times they'll try to get off of that territory. They'll try to get back to the Bible. But if you can hold them there and really ask them to think about these questions, because as you just said, they've never thought about what's happened since the Bible till modern day. And they've certainly not thought about what's happened before the Bible was even made. For example, the Bible wasn't even made until the year 397 AD, officially at the Council of Carthage, and wasn't ratified until Pope Innocent I in 401 AD. So we're talking 400 years without a Bible. Now, many Christians who, don't like the fact that the Catholic Church made the Bible will say, well, we had the Bible books. Okay, yes, we did. But we also had many books that were not of the Bible. We had many biblical books. There were over 80 Gospels to choose from, and the church chose 4. Why only those 4? Likewise, there were many more epistles and Gospels as well, I tell the Protestants and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. So why are only these amount of books in the Bible, and who chose it? And this gets to the position that it's the Catholic Church who chose the canon of Scripture by the authority of the Holy Spirit. And they hate this part, but the Catholic Church did it infallibly. You can't pick and choose what you want to believe in the Bible. The Bible's the Bible, and it was the Bible until 1100 years later when Luther decided that he wanted to take out 7 books. And how did he do it? Did he do it using the Bible alone? No, he used it using his own authority. Excuse me. He used his own authority to take out the books. He didn't like the books. He didn't think they belonged, so he took out the books.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you're whistling my song because, as you know, I started a channel on YouTube that's all it's going to focus on is just that issue on the Deuterocanon. So this is music to my ears. But you made an excellent point though, because for our separated brethren, they will say that the Bible's infallible, that all those books and only those books that belong in Scripture are there in their Bible. But when it comes to, okay, well, who made that infallible decree, right? Then they're in deep water, because obviously the Bible doesn't make that decree. So there has to be some sort of human institution, maybe, that's capable of doing it?
Exactly. And this is the whole point where the church comes around. It comes around full circle, the fact that the Catholic Church is the authority to put the Bible together. And if we're saying that the Bible has an authority and then it has to be listened to, well, then we have to listen to the authority that put it together in the first place, and that would be the Catholic Church, called by the Pope and the Catholic councils. And there was a church that said these books are going to be in the Bible, and these ones are not. And if the Catholic Church has the authority to canonize the Bible, then the Catholic Church has the authority to interpret it. The Bible does not say that every individual Christian can interpret it any way they want. And in fact, I tell Protestants, look at the book of Acts. And can you find me anywhere in the book of Acts, the first 100 years of the church, can you find me anywhere where you see Christians just sitting around on the side of the road or on a park bench, just reading the Bible, reading the scriptures and trying to interpret for themselves what they think it means and arguing with each other about what they think it means? It's unheard of in the Bible. It's not heard of. And in fact, you'll see the opposite. You'll see that Jesus gave his authority, his teaching and preaching authority, to the apostles, who taught and preached in his name with that authority. They did miracles in his name with that authority. They made doctrine. They corrected people. They reproved. And they didn't go to Scripture for everything. They did it by their own authority. And that's a really important point that we can know by knowing the Bible and history.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and not only that, but also the history of doctrine, not just church history, but the history of doctrine, because you could also point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, in the 380s, 390s, the early church fathers had a lot to say about other things that they would contest, like Marian doctrine, right, papal authority. When they're defining the canon, they also hold on to a lot of Catholic truths, or all Catholic truths.
Exactly. And I think it's important to know that not all of the earliest Christians believed on the Bible canon. And this is what a lot of Christians will say. They'll say, well, the earlier Christians just agreed on it. They knew which books were inspired. They didn't question it. They just put the Bible together. But the reality is many early Christians did not think Revelation or Hebrews or 3 John were inspired, whereas other ones did think Barnabas, Clement, and the Shepherd of Hermas were inspired. So there were different canons floating around. And that's why I ask questions to Protestants. We'll pick it up.
All right, very good. We're chatting with Catholic Brian Mercier about history and apologetics. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio at no cost to you. Thanks in advance for supporting CRC and VMPR, and may God richly bless you and your family.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're talking about apologetics and church history with our good friend, Catholic Brian. Brian Mercier is on the phone. And Brian, I love that because what you've shown is that even when you're talking to somebody who's a quote-unquote Bible-alone Christian, you still can't avoid, or really you should interject, church history. That's a really cool idea.
Absolutely, because otherwise we're just going to pepper you all day long with where do you find this in the Bible? Where do you find that in the Bible? And you can just derail that in seconds by saying, well, how do you know that those books should even be in the Bible? How do we even have a Bible in the first place? Let's back up a little bit. And then all of a sudden, they're on the defensive and the ball's in your court. So it's a great way to turn that around.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's move from Bible-only Christians to, Christians may not know a lot about church history, but like you pointed out at the beginning of the program, there's usually some items that we'd call no popery history or Whig history that everybody knows, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition type. Actually, everybody expects the objections for his Spanish Inquisition crusades and that. How do you address things like that? Do you attack it? Do you have countercharges, or do you just fill in the blanks?
What do you mean fill in the blanks? What do you mean by that?
Well, if they bring up, the Crusades were a money-grabbing attempt by the Pope to forcibly convert Muslims and Jews, you could give them the bigger picture, like, no, this is what the Crusades, the object of it was, and here's how it's carried out. Kind of fill in what they're missing, or, what's your tack on that?
Well, I have two attacks. The first is to ask questions, because the majority of people who attack our faith, especially with historical circumstances or bad things that a pope has done or the church has done, supposedly, they don't really know history. They've only read a meme on Twitter, or they saw a meme on Instagram, which is nowadays the education of America, unfortunately. Yeah. And a lot of times they've only heard from this person or that person that the church has done it, but they haven't actually looked into it themselves. And I know for myself, when the Jehovah's Witnesses told me that Constantine started the Catholic Church, I didn't know whether they did or didn't. And it didn't sound right, but I had no idea what to say. And even if a Catholic that's listening right now knows that something isn't right, they still don't know what to say. So I challenge, before I tell you how I attack that, Carrie, I just want to challenge your listeners to know the basics, even just the basics of church history for each topic. For example, we have a folder on our YouTube channel, which is Catholic Truth, our Catholic Truth YouTube channel. And we have a folder that's 1 to 3 minute videos. And we have a 2-minute video on how to explain the Crusades in just 2 minutes. We also have one on how to defend the Blessed Virgin Mary in 1 minute. So these are the kind of pocket guides that Catholics need to know to be able to dialogue with people. You don't need to go read hundreds of books like we have, and they don't need to go ransack libraries to find all of this stuff. But if they know the basics, they're going to know more than the average person. So, for example, I remember some Mormons came to my house, and they asked me, and a lot of atheists bring this up to me too on our YouTube channel. They say, why would I listen to the Catholic Church? the Catholic Church had 3 popes at one time. Not even they could get it together. And so I said, well, okay, that's a fair objection. Let me ask you a question. Who were the 3 popes at one time? And all of a sudden there was a deer in the headlight look. I said, what were their names? And they didn't know. And I said, okay, well, what year did this happen? And they just kept staring at me. They're like, we don't know. And I said, what were the historical circumstances that were happening that caused supposedly 3 popes to emerge? And they didn't know. And I said, you are really angry about this one event that you really know nothing about. You just know, or you've heard that there were 3 popes, but you literally know nothing about it. Have you thought to study it more? And this is where I come in on my other attack, not just asking questions, but filling in the blanks. And then I explained to them. I remember I handed my watch. I took my watch off, and I slid it across the table to the Mormons in my house. And I said, you have that watch now. Pick it up. And they picked it up. And I said, whose watch is that? And they said, it's yours. And I said, that's right. I said, but what if both of you claim that the watch is yours? Does it make it yours just because you claim it? And they said, no. And I said, exactly. And that, in a nutshell, is what the situation was with the 3 popes at one time. There was, in fact, only one pope, but there were 2 people who claimed to be pope, and this caused a big division in the church and a lot of confusion. But ultimately, there was only one pope through it all who was validly elected by the church and continued during that entire time. And even when he died, another validly elected pope took his place. But so, yes, there was confusion because many people were claiming to be pope, but there was only one pope. And the Mormons were like, oh, we actually never knew that. And they had a whole change in their tone of the way they understood it. I said, great. What topic do you want to talk about next? And so this is kind of how I deal with these things, Gary. It's like when people say that, if an atheist or a Christian Scientist or even an ex-Catholic says, well, look at the Catholic Church. I'm a scientific person. I like science, so I only go by science. And you guys persecuted Galileo, so therefore you don't like science. And I'll say, I'll ask a question. Okay, why did the Catholic Church persecute Galileo? And they'll say, well, because he taught a theory that they didn't like. I said, well, what was the theory? Most times they don't even know. Some people will say heliocentricity, and I'll say, great. Did you know that Copernicus taught the same theory and he dedicated his book to the Pope? If the Catholic Church didn't condemn him for heliocentricity, do you think Galileo might have been condemned for a different reason? And all of a sudden they don't know. And so this is how, just by knowing a little bit of history and by learning the power of asking questions in apologetics can really throw people off and make them more open to the truth and be like, okay, well, I never thought about that before. Okay, well, what did happen? And a lot of people will ask me what happened. Then I fill in the blanks, and it makes sense to them. And you can see in their minds, when you can see just the way their eyes are looking at you, that they're filling in the blanks, that puzzle pieces are going into place, and things are starting to make sense in their mind versus, just some cheesy bumper sticker attack on the church becomes something that's much more informed and actually makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, in fact, that's same thing I use too. The first thing, ask questions. The thing is, they think they know what they're talking about when actually they know very little about it. And it's just simply asking them questions and just saying, okay, well, who was it? When was it? Why was it? You kind of expose them like, wow, I really don't know much on this subject. And that opens the door for, like you said, filling in the blanks. Beautiful. Right.
And a lot of times we don't even need to know a lot of church history. We just need to ask the right questions and make them realize that they don't know it either. You know
right.
what I mean? That they don't actually know church history and they haven't maybe learned these things correctly. And so maybe they'll go back and look it up. So I think that's why asking questions are so important, even if you don't know necessarily the answers yourself. Or even if an atheist says, I don't believe in God, what's the first thing you say? Well, why not? Why don't you believe in God? Did you ever believe in God at one point? And what caused you to stop believing in God? See, a lot of times people say, don't argue about politics and religion. Why? Because people are fierce about what they believe, but very few people have any facts to back it up. So they're strong to really want to defend it, and they'll fight you on it, even though what they believe might not even be true because it's very shallowly backed up by any sort of evidence at all. And in fact, I used to get very angry about politics because I believed strongly what I believed and I hated the other side, but in reality, I didn't really know what I was talking about. I had just ingrained these into my mind, and I needed to do a lot more research. So just by asking these questions, you're causing other people to maybe go do some research and find out for themselves and come back to the faith. I've had so many people, Gary, just by asking them questions and filling the even basic blanks for them, have them be more open to the Catholic faith.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and, that's a great insight, too, because I know for Catholic apologists, sometimes, especially new ones, they get put off when someone gets angry or gets heated. But really, that's kind of a tell, isn't it, that they really don't have the answers, and they're trying to kind of supplement their lack of knowledge with anger or, verbosity or something like that.
Exactly. And there's a lot of books that I used to read back in the day, and it's called assertiveness training, because a lot of people are either too timid or they're too aggressive. They'll either fight or flight. And a lot of people are abused maybe in their families as a kid. Their parents abuse them. They control them. Like one mother or father may say, I'm right, you're wrong. Even if you're right, you're wrong. So everybody's known somebody like that, who's always right. But the reality is, in assertiveness training, you learn to deal with these type of people in a way that in asking questions and repeating statements, you can get them outside of their pre-programmed attacks on you. So, for example, I talked to a Greek Orthodox, and they said that the Catholic Church broke away from the Greek Orthodox in 1054, and I told him he was a little bit confused. It was actually the other way around, and he started attacking the Catholic Church and saying, history's clear that the Catholic Church broke away in 1054. So I asked a historical question. Can you prove that? What evidence do you have to back that up? And they, of course, had nothing. And so one time after another, they just started saying that phrase that the Catholic Church broke away. It's obvious. And I would say, well, I'm just looking for a little evidence. Can you help educate me on this? And I'm, kind of playing dumb here. And I'm saying, I really want to know for my own knowing. And they said, well, you should know. I mean, you're stupid if you don't know. It's obvious that the Catholic Church broke away from the Orthodox Church. I said, that might be true, but I'm just looking for some evidence on that. Could you show me some evidence? And so we keep going back to this, and I'll phrase it in different ways, and eventually they'll either say, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you because you don't know anything, which means they actually have no evidence, or they're going to rethink it themselves.
Yeah, very good. We're chatting with Brian Mercier, Catholic Truth Channel, YouTube. Check it out. More to come on the other side of the break. Listen to Hands on Apologetics.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
In Luke 7, Jesus said, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven her, because she has been shown great love. According to St. John of the Cross, Christians should always remember that the value of their good works is not based on number and excellence. Their value is based on the love for God that prompts them to do the works. May we always be motivated by true love for God and not worry so much about what we do.
Buying or
but why
selling
we
your
do
home
it.
or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're having a great discussion with our good friend Brian Mercier of thecatholictruth.org, or also check out the Catholic Truth on YouTube. And Brian, yeah, that's very common. You're arguing with somebody, they don't have facts to back it up, and you're asking the questions. And, it's hard for me not to smile, because whenever they say something like, well, it's just so obvious, it's like they're really digging a hole, aren't they? Because if it's that obvious, then you could give me one or two examples, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was debating someone on social media the other day, and they said, God's not real, you guys are brainwashed. And I said, can you prove that? And they said, well, obviously God's not real. You Christians are brainwashed to think so. I was like, well, do you have any evidence to back yourself up with? And we went over and over, and she had no evidence whatsoever. So asking questions and just knowing a little bit of historical knowledge is very important. If you can think of, if you don't mind, Gary, just going back to the Bible for a minute,
Okay.
and thinking about the Bible, a lot of early Christians, this is really helpful to know church history in apologetics for this reason, even with the Bible, because they will say, well, the Eucharist, you believe it's truly the body and blood of Christ as Catholics, but all of the rest of Christianity, Protestant religions, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe that it's only a symbol. So clearly, you don't know what you're talking about. It's in the Bible that it's just a symbol. Look, Jesus said, do this in memory of me. See, it's a symbol. And then you can bring them back and say, did you know that all Christians for over 1,200 years believed that the Eucharist was the true body and blood of Christ, the same way that Catholics do today? And they'll think about it for a second, and some will say, no, I didn't know that. But the reality is you want to get them to realize that all of the earliest Christians, and I will use this terminology, all of the earliest Christians unanimously believed what Catholics believe today. And it wasn't until over 1,500 years later that somebody changed that teaching to what you believe today. Which one do you think really comes from Christ? The one that's only about 200 to 500 years old, and quite frankly, there's hundreds of different interpretations of what you believe, or the one that goes back 2,000 years to the time of Christ, and every Christian believed down through the centuries. So I try to phrase this in a way using church history and other Christians based on church history to help them realize this. And they'll say, well, we don't care about history. We only go by the Bible. And so I gently correct them and say, well, this is what I'm saying. All of the earliest Christians disagree with you on your biblical interpretation. They all interpret the Bible unanimously the same way that Catholics interpret it today. So yours is actually a new teaching, meaning it's invented. A human person without any authority came up with it at some point. And we know that Zwingli was really the first person to start teaching the Eucharist as, a doctrine, as a symbol. And Luther even disagreed with him, and Calvin, and they fought against each other. At the Castle of Marburg, they wanted to come up with a Protestant creed, and they couldn't even, because they fiercely fought against each other on the doctrine of the Eucharist. And then a little while, I think it was 60 years after Luther died, I tell these people that there was a book written called The 200 Different Definitions of the Eucharist, and how Protestants had come up with 200 different interpretations of what the words, "this is my body," means. But Catholics have had one interpretation for 2,000 years. You tell me which one comes from Christ.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not only are you asking questions to kind of expose that, there's this gap of knowledge that they don't have, but also, I love that countercharge. That book, I can't remember who wrote it, but 200 interpretations. You can get that on Google, and it's bizarre. That just do this. This is my body. Came up with 200 different interpretations after Luther. It's staggering, and only a few decades after Luther.
Exactly. And just so you know, and just so your listeners know, this kind of approach can be used for pretty much any religion. I mean, take anything that you're discussing with Mormons, like baptism for the dead. If you know even a little bit of church history, you know that baptism for the dead was never practiced. Now, Mormons claim to be the original church, or the resurrected original church, and that Jesus restored. Now, and therefore, they believe that the earliest Christians believed the same things they believe today. So do Jehovah's Witnesses, who believe that Jesus is Michael the Archangel. So I simply ask these religions, can you show me where any of the earliest Christians believed in baptism for the dead? Can you quote them for me? Can you show me one of their writings? Or likewise to the Jehovah's Witnesses, can you show me one early Christian who believed that Jesus was Michael the Archangel, or that Jesus was not God? Because Jehovah's Witnesses believe Jesus wasn't God. So can you show me where the earliest Christians believed this? And then I go on to show them, because I know church history and I've written down a lot of the early Christian quotes. I show them how they unanimously, or virtually unanimously, minus one or two heretics here or there, but they all believed in Jesus as God, and there is no written evidence anywhere for baptism of the dead. So if you believe that the earliest Christians were Mormon or Jehovah's Witness, you should be able to find these things in the writings of the earliest Christians. But of course, they don't know these things, which is why one famous Catholic convert said that to be steeped in history is to cease to be Protestant. Because once you really know church history, it's obvious that it was Catholic, that all the earliest Christians were Catholic, that they started the Catholic Church, and that Catholic Church has existed for 300 years before Constantine. So when people tell me Constantine started the Catholic Church, I said, how can Pope Dionysius be writing a letter to the church in the year 262 if Constantine started the Catholic Church in 325 AD or 317 AD with the Edict of Milan? And so at this point, they're like, I don't know. And then they'll say, well, prove to me this. And so I'll send them the quote by the Pope, and they'll say, oh, I don't really have an answer for that. And so it's just little things, just knowing a little bit of these church histories can really offset these people. And really, it's not just about derailing them. It's about opening their eyes to something they've never been taught. It's about opening their eyes to help them perceive lies that they've been fed so that they can come to know the truth, the real Jesus Christ, and his true church.
Yeah, excellent point. Because, you have to fight the temptation that you're not going for the jugular. You're not trying to beat them over the heads with your history book. The goal is just to get them to start thinking and reconsidering and maybe, hopefully, looking more deeply into the issue, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And I said at the beginning of the show, like when you ask them these questions and they just stare at you, it's like, there's kind of like a feeling like, ooh, this is actually nice not to be put on the defensive for once. It's nice to have other people on the defensive once. And it's just a byproduct of, knowing your faith. But in reality, our hearts must long for them, for their souls. Our hearts must long for the fact that they've been lied to, that they just don't know. They attack the Catholic Church because they're angry, and it's an emotional hurt that they're struggling with, and it comes out as an attack. Or they've been lied to about, there's a book out there called The Trail of Blood, where Catholics murdered everybody for hundreds of years because they didn't believe what the Catholic Church believed. And I've read that book. And if I didn't know actual church history, I would hate the Catholic Church too. And this book has been widely debunked by scholars, and not even Catholic scholars, over and over again. Even Protestants have debunked it. But for the people who don't know better, they get angry. So our goal is just to really help them, inform them, and open their eyes, because that's the first step of helping them to see the truth. And it's the truth that leads to Christ, and it's the truth that sets you free.
Yeah, amen to that. So, Brian, for those Catholics out there who want to defend the faith, they want to bone up on church history because probably they don't know much about it. How do you go about doing that?
Well, that's a great question. I would recommend starting with simple books. There are big books. I mean, there's a 6-volume work called The History of Christendom, which is one of my favorites. But then there's a smaller version of church history called The Concise History of the Catholic Church. Both are good. I prefer the huge one because it's just so interesting. But maybe just pick up, if you're interested in the early Christians, pick up Jimmy Akin's book called The Fathers Know Best by Catholic Answers. That's a great place to start and to read the early church. Another good book is How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. Or you could just go to my YouTube channel. I talk a lot about the Bible and church history. And we at Catholic Truth love church history. And so we challenge Protestants to know it as well. And a lot of our videos challenge them on the Bible and challenge them on church history. We have an 18-minute video showing why the Catholic Church is the true church, not only from the Bible, but also from history. So people could come to our channel, Catholic Truth, and really learn a lot. But I also recommend books and even websites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important, too, because like you pointed out, if you go to a standard historical work, a solid one like Warren Carroll's work, The History of Christendom, and you get overwhelming, and there's so many details. And if you're like me, I can't remember them all. But it's so helpful when an apologist can kind of break out those details like you do with those videos. So it's just little snippets that you can watch a couple of times, kind of commit it to memory, and then you never know. You can have in your back pocket to use, right?
Absolutely, exactly. And I've had people say that, hey, I've been watching your videos for a few months now, and I watch a couple of them a few times each just to memorize the arguments. And I just want to let you know that we have been defending our faith a lot more, and I actually can stand up for my faith now thanks to the Catholic Truth videos. And I say, and that always warms my heart because Catholics are learning to defend their faith now, and they don't have to go read 100 books to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like you said, education, it's today it's all Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Unfortunately, not a lot of people hit the books, and so they'll see a meme or something and think, oh, wow, here's a great thing I could throw out at a Catholic, but they don't have the background info.
Exactly. So I recommend people, usually if they want to start learning their faith, I recommend that they start reading our articles on our website at thecatholictruth.org. I mean, we have 4 blog articles just on the Crusades giving a lot of information rather than hundreds of pages of a book. So read one article from our website each day, or watch one video from our YouTube each day. If you watch or read one thing each day, you are going to grow so much in your faith, but also learn practically how to explain it.
Yeah, very good. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's Brian Mercier, and man, what a blast. Coming up next, the fun continues with the Terry and Jesse Show. Time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center, turn off the dojo lights. Thank you so much for tuning in, and God willing, we'll be back tomorrow to do this thing hands-on apologetics. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church, so I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.